Hi there again, Explaining History fans. Post-run, if you don't get the reference, watch the previous video. As I was going around the lake, I had a few thoughts, a few ideas about evidence, I guess. About ways in which we can think about being careful on the subject of evidence and thinking critically about it. And I guess the analogy goes something like this. In history, we hear all manner of stories about, great and terrible events like the Depression or the Holocaust or, the assassination of Kennedy or the D-Day landings or things like that. And these big stories we very much take on an uncritical basis. You read about them in a history textbook, you go, oh yes, okay, well that must seem right, I'll repeat that in the exam. But we need to have an element of caution here. All we are hearing are the stories that other historians are telling us. Not all historians agree. Not all historians are working with a full set of facts. In fact, no historian is working with a full set of facts. All historians work with what they've got. Some more than others. Some have more complete pictures than others. So we need really to challenge the story. Now, think about this on a personal level. If you guys are at school or college, you all must have heard a particularly good piece of salacious, juicy gossip from time to time. I know when I was studying, I did all the time, and periodically I passed it around too. So you hear a story. Perhaps it relates to a friend of yours. Perhaps it relates to an acquaintance or someone maybe even you don't like very much. You hear the story and you think, wow, this is outlandish, this is outrageous, and it certainly doesn't seem like the kind of thing that person would do, but do you know what? It's too good a story to kill. What would be the sensible thing to do in this situation? The sensible thing to do, before you go repeating it to anybody else, is to find out where the story comes from. And this is what we do when we look at historical evidence. We look at theories as to, I don't know, say why the National Health Service was created in 1948, or why the Cold War began in 1945. One theory might be that in the Cold War case that it was all the Soviets' fault. Okay, so before we repeat that, it might be an idea to find out where that story comes from, which historians were saying it first, why they were saying it, in what context they were saying it, and whether they had any personal kind of reasons for saying it. Some of the historians of the Cold War were involved in the events of the Cold War, so, it doesn't necessarily invalidate what they have to say, but we certainly have to bear it in mind. So it's about knowing the story before we repeat it. It might be an idea, before we repeat this piece of gossip, to go and ask some other people. So before we go passing one version of events off as gospel, as the only truth, it might be an idea to go and talk to other people involved who know this person who's the subject of the gossip. On the history side of things, it might be an idea to look at the whole range of things that are written about, say, the establishment of the NHS or the commencement of the Cold War. In both cases, there's a vast canon of historical writing on the subject. And when you start to read around all of that, and you can evaluate 2, 3, 4, 5 different arguments, or 2 or 3 schools of thought, that's when you're starting to be the outstanding, the A-star history student. That's the kind of thing that a majority of history students tend not to do. They all can do. If you watch the previous video, you'll know that. They just tend not to. Here's how you stand out from the pack, or here's how the pack itself becomes 10 times better. You understand the entire scope of the discussion. So think about school gossip, if that helps. Try to think about it in those terms, and what a sensible person would do if they heard a particularly juicy rumour. Don't just go repeating it, check it out. Anyway, thanks very much, and I'll catch you on the next video cast. Bye bye.